Good morning. We welcome you to our Sunday worship on this lovely, warm fall morning. My name is Ben Soul, and I am one of the worship associates here at First Parish in Lexington. We extend a special welcome to newcomers. To learn more about us here, there is a pamphlet in the pew rack in front of you to introduce you to FP Lex, as we call ourselves. This is a special weekend. Our sensible northern neighbors are celebrating Thanksgiving this weekend while it is still the harvest season. The local 9 are playing October Ball, and your office calendar reminds you that this is Columbus Day weekend. But should it? Some people don't think so, and they are promoting a growing movement towards celebrating tomorrow as Indigenous Peoples Day. This morning, we are taking the opportunity to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day by hearing from some of those who participated in the First Parish Senior High Youth Group's service learning trip to the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota in June. This was an eye-opening and mind-expanding experience for all who went. Following the service during social hour, you will also be able to see a slideshow of some of the pictures we brought back. That will be in the common room. We have a special announcement about the Caring Circle. There will be a table in the parish hall during social hour after the service where you can learn more about the Caring Circle or sign up to help out. Thank you. Now, please take a moment to hush your electronic devices and to greet those sitting around you. I think that's about it. Let us deepen into worship with the musical introit.
On behalf of all of us, Austin, thank you. We have a covenant in this community, how we will treat one another, agreements that we promise together, how we will care and respect one another. Treaties are like covenants between nations. May those of us who are not indigenous to the land invite ourselves to be called back into covenant and care together with the original peoples of this land, the land of the Massachusetts, the Nipmuc, and the Wampanoag. I invite you now to join in singing our opening hymn, number 1051, We Are. Flame of fire, spark of the universe that warmed our ancestral hearth, agent of life and death, symbol of truth and freedom. We strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home. As Ben lights our chalice, we will join now in singing our song response found in your order of service.
Hi guys, I'm Ella. I'm going to be reading a creation story today. Okay. In Lakota Sioux culture, history is passed down to new generations through the spoken word. There are many different versions of the emergence story, varying from band to band and family to family. This version comes from the Cheyenne Creek community on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation of the Oglala Lakota tribe. The version I share today was adapted by Lisa Maria Steinberg from the Wilmer Smithis telling as told to Cinnabera Eagle. In the beginning, there were no people or bison living on the earth. A bison is like a really large, hairy cow. People at the time lived underground in the Tunkin Teepee, the spirit lodge, and were waiting as the earth was prepared for them by the Creator. To get to the spirit lodge, one must take a passage through what the ancestors referred to as the Oniya Ashoka, where the earth breathes inside. This place is known today as the Wind Cave, referred to in modern Lakota as Maka Oniye, or breathing earth. The trickster spirit, Anag Ite, wanted to play tricks on the people, and so she sent a wolf underground to the Wind Cave with gifts from the surface. One man took out a buckskin cloth and felt the soft leather. Next, they took out the meat, which intrigued them. They had never hunted before and had never tasted anything like meat. They wanted more. The wolf told them if they followed him to the surface of earth, he'd show them where to find the meat and all the other gifts he brought. The leaders of the humans was a man named Tokahe, the first one, and he refused to go with the wolf. He objected, saying the Creator had instructed them to stay underground, and that's what he would do. Most of the people stayed with Tokahe, but all those who tried the meat followed the wolf to the surface. The journey to the surface was long and hard. When they reached the hole, the first thing people saw was a giant blue sky above them. The surface of the earth was bright. It was summertime, so all the plants were in bloom. It was the most gorgeous place they had ever been before. The wolf led the people to the lodge of Anag Ite, who was in disguise. She taught the people how to hunt and how to work and tan an animal hide. The work was difficult, and the people grew tired easily and worked slowly. The people knew nothing about the earth's seasons and had not prepared for winter. By the time the first snow came, they didn't have enough clothes for everyone. They began to freeze and starve. They returned to the lodge of Anag Ite for help, but it was then that she revealed her true intentions, to bring humans to the surface of earth to play tricks on them. The people ran away, back to the side of the hole which they'd emerged, only to find it had been covered, leaving them trapped on the surface. The people didn't know what to do, so they simply sat down on the ground and cried. At this time, the Creator heard them and asked why they were there. They explained the story of the wolf and Anag Ite, but the Creator was upset. The Creator said, "You should not have disobeyed me. Now I have to punish you." The way the Creator did that was by transforming them, turning them from people into great wild beasts. This was the first bison herd. Time passed, and the earth was finally ready for the people to live upon it. The Creator instructed Tokahe, who had stayed underground, to lead the people through the passageway, in the cave, and onto the surface. On the way, they stopped to pray 4 times, stopping at the last entrance. On the surface, the people saw the hoof prints of bison. The Creator told them to follow the bison. From the bison, they could get food, tools, clothes, and shelter. The bison would lead them to the water. Everything they needed to survive on earth could come from the bison. When they left the cave, the Creator shrunk the hole from the size of a man into the size it is now, too small for most people to enter, to serve as a reminder to the people who never forget where they'd come from. After the anthem, our pre-K through 2nd graders will depart for their class. Thank you.
I'd like to invite you into a time of prayer and meditation. I'm going to be sharing a prayer written by my colleague, the Reverend Anna Bladel. And as we enter into this time, I'd like to lift up a few members of our congregation and friends of our congregation that I'd like us to hold in our hearts. I'd like us to lift up Parker Hurdle, who is in rehab and was in the hospital for 3 weeks and is making a very slow recovery, and Joyce Dietmeyer, who is also in rehab. They both need your love and support. I'd like to lift up Serapi Hagininian's Waltzer's beloved brother, Krikor Haginian, who passed away, and several of you went to his memorial service on Friday. So we hold Serapi and her family in our hearts. I've been asked to lift up a man named Speedy Cross, who our youth met while they were in Pine Ridge. He's been diagnosed with terminal cancer and has only a short time to live. So we lift him up as part of our extended family as well. My words this morning are written in the midst of the turbulence that we've gone through this week. And I ask that we take this time to recognize the weight of what we've all been through. And then we go to the back and light candles of joy and sorrow as we need to. And after this time, I ask that we wring out all of that emotion and make space for the words that our youth are going to bring, because they bring words of wisdom and power and hope. And I want us to be ready to hear what they have to say. Will you join me in prayer? Blessed are you who are raging. Blessed are you who are mourning. Blessed are you who feel numb. Blessed are you who feel sick and tired, and sick and tired. Blessed are you who refuse to turn away. Blessed are you who need to turn away. Blessed are you who keep breathing deeply. Blessed are you who are tending to your own needs. Blessed are you who are tending to the needs of another. Blessed are you who have been calling. Blessed are you who have been organizing. Blessed are you who have been testifying. Blessed are you who have been hearing. Blessed are you who have been resisting. Blessed are you who feel broken, open, beyond repair. Blessed are you who are raw beyond words. Blessed are you who are working hotlines and crisis care centers and bearing witness to the forces of violence and trauma unleashed and unloosened. Blessed are you who are marching. Blessed are you who are weeping. Blessed are you who preach and know that divinity resides in despised, abused, violated flesh. Blessed are you who know deep in your bones that you are good, are beautiful and beloved and sacred and worthy and believed and held and capable of healing beyond your wildest imagination. Blessed are you who remind others that they are good and beautiful and beloved and sacred and worthy and believed and held and capable of healing beyond their wildest imagination. Blessed are we when we dare to dream of a world without sexual violence, without white supremacy, without misogyny, without police brutality, without anti-trans and anti-queer violence. Blessed are we when we stay tender. Blessed are we when we stay fierce. Blessed are we when we dare to imagine repair and transformation. And blessed are we when we labor together to make it so. Let us rest in the silence that we make together.
Please join me in the responsive reading 551, Earth Teach Me, and you will be reading the italicized text. Earth, teach me stillness, as the grasses are stilled with light. Earth, teach me caring, as parents who secure their young.
Earth, teach me courage, as the tree which stands all alone.
Earth, teach me limitation, as the ant which crawls on the ground.
Earth, teach me freedom, as the eagle which soars in the sky.
Earth, teach me resignation, as the leaves which die in the fall.
Earth, teach me regeneration, as the seed which rises in the spring.
Earth, teach me to forget myself, as melted snow forgets its life.
Earth, teach me to remember kindness, as the dry fields weep with rain.
Please join in singing the hymn number 1069, Ancient Mother.
Hello. Hi, my name is Thomas Klebe, and I had the honor to go on our service trip to South Dakota to the Pine Ridge Reservation there, and this is just a short reflection I've prepared, so enjoy. So right now, if I open my phone, I can see around 23 articles on President Donald Trump and various things which pertain to him. Now, I made that number up. It's fake, and I never counted any articles while writing this, but you probably all believed me. As we live in a fairly liberal town, I think it's safe to assume that the majority of us don't have the kindest feelings towards our president. And those on the reservation who we talked to pretty much held the same opinion. However, the difference is that they also emphasized how people on Pine Ridge are and have to be more focused, understandably, on their day-to-day lives. Now, every person who went on our trip to Pine Ridge Indian Reservation learned about privilege. We were immersed in a world previously unknown to us, in the majority of the U.S. We traveled from one of the richest towns in one of the richest states to the poorest place in America, Allen, South Dakota. This may have opened our eyes to a way of life most of us aren't accustomed to here, but in the end, we were still glorified tourists. Every single one of us knew that after the week was over, we'd be able to come back to Lexington. We wouldn't actually ever have to live the lives of the Lakota after that week. The essence of privilege in this regard is to be able to visit real human suffering and struggle and not be forced to accept it as a facet of your everyday life. Privilege is knowing your car is going to start every morning before you go to work. Privilege is being able to walk or drive a couple minutes to a grocery store and pick out some fresh produce so you can make a salad for the potluck at your local historical society. Privilege is having enough free time to bang out another tweet about the president's latest meltdown. However, possessing and having privilege does not have to be a source of shame. If we, in a position of social power, accept our privilege, we can use it as a platform. We live in a time of unprecedented inequality, where more money than ever is distributed to the top 1% of the country. Although most of us in Lexington don't live at that top 1%, we are still lucky people. We have more than most, and many of us engage in various philanthropies, whether it's volunteering in the community or donating to charities and nonprofits. We have demonstrated time and time again the UU spirit of generosity. I encourage us all to give a small portion of what we have to help Pine Ridge. Our guide, Keller, and his family are working tirelessly to make the reservation more self-sufficient. He and his wife plant gardens across the res to supply it with fresh produce, and they assist anyone on the res who might need their help. Now, in closing, I would like to read a quote from Dr. Jonas Salk, the inventor of the polio vaccine. "Our greatest responsibility is to be good ancestors." Now, the crimes of generations past are not ours to atone for, but I would argue we need to hold ourselves at least partially responsible for their modern-day consequences. Everyone in here today has benefited from the genocide of American Indians. Our lives are heirlooms left to us by Custer and Jackson. America is built on the backs of millions of dead Native peoples. The Lakota on Pine Ridge live in poverty and struggle because our forefathers created the world we live in today. The issue of their oppression is not just a modern-day horror, but instead a story that goes back hundreds of years. If we are to be good ancestors, then we need to be those who help the long oppressed and do not allow them to be forgotten again. Thank you. Please join us in singing hymn number 123 in the Gray Book.
Please be seated. My reflection this morning is taken from a journal I wrote about our trip to Pine Ridge. The people mentioned in this journal entry are all from the Cross, Poor Bear, Teoshpaye, many of whom live in and around Allen, South Dakota. Teoshpaye is the Lakota word for extended family, theirs being about 150 people. Its matriarch, Darlene Poor Bear, known by all as Granny, had died a few short weeks before we arrived. Keller Allen is the site director of the Pine Ridge program we participated in. Wednesday evening. After supper, we gathered for another presentation. The evening sun filtered through the cottonwoods and across the green lawn of the cookhouse yard. A boy was introduced to us, a stocky, awkward 14-year-old named Hunka Poor Bear. He mumbled a brief introduction about he had come to play the flute, and he started to play. The first notes caught me by surprise: high, clear, purposeful, graceful, nuanced, haunting. I closed my eyes. The music became a part of the soundscape. The quiet trilling of numerous songbirds, the wind in the leaves, a baby crying softly, all mixing with the plaint of the boy and his flute. The boy finished and sat, and a young woman, Julissa Poorbear, stood. We knew she was supposed to speak, but she just looked down, shifting from foot to foot. Finally, she said, "I don't know where to start." Keller prompted her, asking where she had grown up. So she started, haltingly at first, telling us of her life. Raised by her grandmother, she bolted at age 14, leaving the reservation and her extended Lakota family. She spiraled through alcohol, multiple drug use, 3 daughters, a prison sentence for selling. Finally, pregnant and in her second stint in prison, she went into labor with her 4th child. She was escorted to the hospital for the birth of her son, Star, Wikape, in Lakota. The next day, she was back behind bars, separated from her newborn. That is when she decided to change her life. Now, 2 years sober, living back on the res, she is a quiet example of possibilities for others in her situation. She finished her story and returned to the edge of the gathering, picking up her son again and holding him in her arms. It was time to go back up to the dance ground to prepare for the Inipi, the sweat lodge ceremony. Keller needed to make a phone call, so he went up a small hill nearby to get a signal. I went to get my suit and towel for the sweat lodge out of the van. I started for the nearest outhouse to change, but a thought came to me: full moon day. I thought of all the times when the moon was full that my parents had watched the sun set over Cape Cod Bay at Rock Harbor in Orleans, and then drove to Fort Hill to watch the moon rise over the Atlantic. What if I could do the same here? I saw that Keller was headed back down that small hill, so I climbed up, and indeed, I could see the sun approaching the horizon in the west. The skies were mostly clear, but in the east, there was a bit of haze. The sun touched down and slowly shrank to a bright point, then winked out, leaving a brilliant orange glow radiating from its point of disappearance. I turned around. I waited. A minute, 2, 5 went by. I could see a car come over the hill and down the road toward the dance ground, probably Jim Cross, coming from his council meeting. Another 2 minutes. Below, I could see people greeting the man getting out of the car, loading teepee poles in Keller's truck, tending to the fire. How long before I had to go down to join the Inipi? I stepped over the crest to change into my suit. Climbing back up to the top of the knoll, I looked again to the east, searching the horizon. Then I noticed, just above it, the first hint of a silver disk slowly emerging from the haze. I took a deep breath and then let it out. There was just enough time to pause and to feel the gratitude for all that had brought me to this time and place, for being fortunate enough to experience this moment, and to hope that those who lived here are able to experience, now and then, the same wonder. I thought of the words of one of my favorite hymns: "The soul hath lifted moments above the break of days, when life's great meaning breaketh in sunrise on our ways." As our week progresses, I continue to be whipsawed by the stark contrasts of this land and its people. The beauty and the sorrow blend together in an astonishing patchwork quilt sewn by geography and history, aspiration and cruelty. We are catching glimpses of the story, trying to understand and appreciate what little we can take in. We had done a sweat on Sunday, but tonight was the full moon, which is time each month when an extra Inipi is done. And Jim Cross, Granny's eldest son and a district representative to the Pine Ridge Tribal Council, would lead the ceremony tonight. This time, there was less explanation of what was happening in the sweat lodge as we had had on Sunday. So I believed what we experienced was closer to what their traditional ceremony is. Again, we crouched in the small domed branch and canvas structure as the glowing stones were brought one by one from the fire, ceremoniously tapped with the pipe and sprinkled with sage. The small opening was then completely covered, and we sat cramped and crowded as the water was poured on the stones and the steam hit our faces like a sharp slap in the pitch black. 4 times words were spoken in Lakota and English, and Melvin sang in a high, reedy voice, others joining in. One of the songs we had learned from Quentin yesterday, and we did our best to sing along. 4 times the door was open to allow us a breath of cool air, and a ladle was passed for a sip of water. Then Jim said the men and boys would stay for a 5th round. After the girls and women had left, they poured much more water on the stones. I wrapped the towel around my head and breathed through it and counted the seconds until the canvas was thrown back from the door for the last time. We dried and dressed and sat around the fire, Jim leading the conversation. At a pause, I could tell the gathering was about to break up. Meg, Jackson, and Kadari and I got the gifts we had brought and approached Jim. I said we were pleased and honored that he was there this evening with us, and presented the tobacco and bolts of cloth to him. He seemed pleased and said the cloth would be used as prayer flags on the dance circle tree during the next month's Sundance. Before we left, I struck up a conversation with Elroy. He talked about how fortunate he had been and how he had been able to obtain grants to send his children to college. But for the most part, Allen is a difficult place to grow up and to live. The alcohol and drugs take so many of their youth, he said, and there was so little to do and so few jobs. He was seated, and I stood next to him. He looked directly up at me, the firelight playing on half of his face, and said, "We need help here." He asked that I and those who had come from First Parish find a way to continue our relationship, to come back, or to help from a distance. I didn't have a response except to say, "I understand." Then back to the hotel after another long and amazing day, with Elroy's plea still filling my ears. Let us sing again, hymn number 123, Spirit of Life.
Good morning, or as the Lakota say, Hihani Washte. My name is Jordan O'Hare Gibson. I'd like to talk to you all for a few minutes about something that I've learned personally as a result of the senior high youth group to the Pine Ridge Native American Reservation. As author Mike McIntyre once said, "Sometimes those who give the most are the ones with the least to spare." And this is absolutely true in my experience. While those who live on Pine Ridge may be lacking financially, they have a vast wealth of knowledge, wisdom, compassion, and openness, which rivals any I have ever met before. Let me paint you a picture. Your ancestors arrived on this continent before anybody else. For millennia, they developed, grew, and fine-tuned their civilization. They taught themselves agriculture, they taught themselves how to hunt, they taught themselves medicine, developed language and a rich culture full of music, dance, and reverent spirituality. They lived life on their own terms, following the sacred buffalo, living in harmony with nature, until one day, the United States government came into their land and claimed it for their own. Your ancestors fought to keep their lifestyle, but the U.S. government had superior firepower and no qualms about using it. Your people were forced to live on reservations that were single-digit percentages of the land that they had before. The only consolation was that they were allowed to keep their sacred Black Hills until gold was found there. Adding insult to injury, your ancestors' most sacred site, the location of their origin legend, Wind Cave, was taken and turned into a national park, not dedicated to your people, but to commercialism and white explorers. As the final nail in the coffin, the U.S. government opened fire under no provocation in a massacre that caused no fewer than 201 Native casualties, although some estimates place that number at over 350. Imagine that this was the history of Americans interacting with your people. Would you be open to inviting them into the last bit of land they left you, into your home? Would you let them eat your food, sleep in your backyard, play with your children, participate in your sacred ceremonies which you had been beaten and killed for practicing? Very few of us, if any, have ever had to make this kind of a choice, thankfully, so we don't know the answers. I personally would like to believe that I would, but I honestly can't say. We can all learn a lesson from the Lakota. While it might be cliche, forgive but don't forget. I can assure you that every one of us who has set foot on the reservation was changed that week in ways that we will always remember and will never be the same. So thank you to all of you who bought soup, donated, or otherwise showed your support. Thank you for coming today and listening to our reflections. It's appreciated immensely.
The community of Allen, South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Reservation is a food desert. The Pine Ridge Agricultural Initiative, with whom we worked at Pine Ridge, is an organization working to build sustainable farming on the reservation. They are currently fundraising to buy a tractor, which would allow them to plow more land for gardens and harvest timber for building projects. All non-pledged donations this Sunday will be donated to the Pine Ridge Agricultural Initiative. Please make checks payable to First Parish in Lexington with Pine Ridge in the memo line. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Please rise for the unison affirmation. During the first Sweat Lodge ceremony we experienced at Pine Ridge, I, as the male elder of our group, was called upon with no notice to explain our Unitarian Universalist faith. I did my best, sitting in the hot, cramped darkness, to call up my UU elevator speech, and finished by asking the rest of our group to join me in speaking these words. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is our prayer. This was a great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another to the end that all souls will grow into harmony with the divine. Our closing hymn this morning is number 163 in the gray hymnal, For the Earth Forever Turning, number 163.
As I extinguish our chalice, I invite you to join in singing our response found in your order of service. As you walk out of here today and your feet sink into the green, may you remember those who called it home first. And please take with you the messages we've heard today. Forgive, but not forget, and use our privilege to help. Amen.
If you have questions for the youth, they will be in the common room after the service, where there will be a slideshow running as well. Thank you.